Ready graphics? Ready theme? Cue it.
Good evening. For your information tonight.
Hi, I'm Jesse Mullins.
And I'm Lauren Milberger.
And this is FYI,
the Murphy Brown Podcast.
Being on Maisel is that they have used the fact that I speak Polish, and I have sworn a lot in Polish. You know, I am swearing in Polish, but like no one really knows exactly like what I'm saying.
Hello. Hi, Jesse.
Well, hello. Hi, Lauren.
We have a special guest today.
Indeed.
Mystery guest, will you please sign in?
Hello. My name is Matilda Shadagis, and I play Zelda on The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and I am so happy to be here today. Thank you so much, Lauren and Jesse, for having me. And yes, hi, everybody.
Hi. Well, it's our pleasure to have you.
Hello, welcome.
Murphy, Milberger, Mullins, and Matilda.
We did it. We got the alliteration.
Now, as well as being a wonderful actor, you also are a writer and a director as well, my understanding. And then you have a children's book that's out?
Yes. I wrote and illustrated a children's picture book called All Cats Speak Polish. You can learn a handful of basic Polish words in a very, cute way, especially if you are a cat lover, if your kids are cat lovers. And raise your hand. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right. Raising my hand
I love
right
cats.
here.
I don't have one, but I do love them.
It was something that an idea that I had for many years, just in the back of my head, thinking, that would be like a cool idea to do. My first language is Polish, and then the pandemic happened, and it's just crazy. It's like I just call it pandemic creativity. It was just one of those things where I just started drawing a lot more, which is what I used to do. I was drawing. I've been drawing since high school, but then life got in the way in terms of like the time commitments that you have for yourself. And it was just something to do that took me away from watching CNN 24/7. Yeah. And it was
true. That was necessary.
Yes, it was like it was a mental break. It was like I really needed that for my own sanity. I was drawing more, I was writing more in general, and I needed that.
Well, I definitely need to catch up on my Polish because I only know one word of Polish, which is tell me if I'm right.
Bad
okay. No, it's not. I know it from I learned it because
that's the one word that people know.
Here's the thing. My grandfather spoke Polish, but I think it was a very bad memory, and so he never spoke it, and I was too young to understand to ask him to speak. Like I didn't know till he passed away that he spoke 4 languages because he lived his parents were from Poland, and then he was born in Belarus, and then they lived in Ukraine. So they just sort of traveled, until they finally, like my joke is, hit the water and we're like, guess we're going to America. So I know it from Mel Brooks, and I'm sure I'm going to butcher it. Dziękuję.
Oh, okay. So that's, thank you.
Kind of. I didn't really say it right, did I?
That's pretty good. No, it's good. Dziękuję.
I don't know if you know To Be or Not to Be, the Mel Brooks version, but he and Anne Bancroft sing Sweet Georgia Brown in Polish. And when I was a kid, I used to try to sing along, but I'm sure I didn't really know what I was saying. And for some reason, at the end, they keep saying, thank you. And so that stuck in my head, and that's all I can say.
No, that's pretty good. That's actually one of the words in my book for the basic, Polish words. But I have in my the kids' book, it's dzięki, which means thanks. So I figured that was like a little bit easier for kids to say, So, but yeah, you did a great job pronouncing that.
Thank you. It's been a long time that I've been working on the one word.
But that's like one of the things that I have loved about being on Maisel is that they have used the fact that I speak Polish, and I have sworn a lot in Polish as Zelda. And what I also love is they have chosen not to do subtitles. So, I am swearing in Polish, but like no one really knows exactly like what I'm saying.
That's fantastic. Oh, I love that.
I will say, credit to your acting. There are several times when I'm like, I'm pretty sure she's
Yes, exactly. Well, that's also why I think in the context.
The context is clear.
Yes, exactly. They're just like, subtitles are not needed here.
Like, we got it.
That's something that actually, well, we're on the subject that's interesting to me because, we're both actors and we find the audition process obviously fascinating and like interesting. Were they looking for someone who spoke Polish or it was just someone who spoke another language?
No, they were looking, I remember it was Eastern European. So they were looking for an Eastern European, it said Eastern European maid. So I just remember like in the audition, like there were a couple of friends of mine, like one was Hungarian, one was, I think, Ukrainian. So it's the answer is they were looking for someone to do an accent. Whether or not they were looking specifically to have someone speak another language, I can't answer that. But for the audition, they definitely were looking for someone who was Eastern European and could do an accent at the minimum. Yeah. So, but then after I got cast, then then they made the choice to make Zelda Polish, like officially, like in the script, and then have me, speak Polish, since that is what my personal background was. So I just think that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'm always curious as somebody who works with dialects, and you shared that you grew up in the south side of Chicago,
yes.
correct? For you as a performer, did you have any trouble when you were growing up or becoming a professional actor with accent within your household versus when you go into the audition room? Have you had to kind of assimilate as you've gone, or is that something as someone who grew up in the U.S. it was less of a concern?
Well, I was born and raised in Chicago, so if anything, I have a Chicago accent.
I was going to say.
And that's really funny that you bring that up, because pretty much most of the auditions that I started going on was for Eastern European. So I wasn't even speaking in my natural voice in these auditions. I was I was affecting, an Eastern European accent. So it's like I've played Russians. I was Ukrainian on The Sopranos. Like here I am being Polish, yes, on Maisel. So I just thought that was pretty hysterical in the end. But I've had auditions before where I've walked in for an Eastern European role, and I walk in as me at first. I'm just like, hi, how are you? And I've had actually a couple casting directors like whip their head up going, wait, you're supposed to be Eastern European. And I'm like, well, yeah. It's like, but it's quite interesting how everyone has their own perspective on how you should be or not be, or like, oh, you'll never make it because you sound like this or you don't sound like that, or, and nowadays I feel like that's, it's more, I feel more character actors are getting roles, and there's more of them. There's more roles for character actors. You don't have to sound like that standard American, like, what is it, like that anchor person from Ohio.
The transatlantic.
Exactly. Like that, exactly.
Yeah.
So you do have a lot more people or actors, being able to just, have a variety of different accents and stuff.
It's funny you talk about people expecting you to sound a certain way when you go in. When we get into our episode and we look at Gere Watanabe, who guests in this episode, and he talks about his audition for 16 Candles and what he was expected to do when he went in.
Oh, wow.
It's very interesting.
Is he the one who was the yoga instructor?
Yes. And he was Long Duk Dong in 16 Candles.
Right.
Japanese boy from Oregon. So of course he was like, there were accents in my family, but I didn't have one because while there were accents around me, I grew up in Oregon.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and so for Zelda in particular, like I think of my mom. Like I think of like, how would my mom, say this? So my mom definitely caught on to English a lot better than my dad. And she still has like a pretty thick accent, but my dad like really had like, he sounded like Dracula, like just like so thick. Like none of my friends who came over, they were always just looking at me kind of like, he was speaking English, but then they look at me like, can you please translate what he just said?
Yeah, the American ear, though, I think also is just not used to hearing different accents. Whereas like I had in grad school a friend from Scotland, and I would translate for him. And to the point of which he was like, can you please stop? I was like, I'm sorry, I thought I was helping. He's like, I know you do, but it just does not make me feel good. And I was like, I'm sorry. I thought he was like one of my best. He's still one of my best friends, and I just like people would just. I think also they got used to looking at me, being like, "What is he saying?" And so,
yeah, there's something to be said about American audiences and just the average American person in general. Maybe focusing a bit more on some active listening rather than expecting something to be immediately what they're used to hearing. I think maybe some active listening would help all of us.
Yes, it's very true. Very true.
Speaking of listening, so this is your first time ever seeing Murphy Brown, correct?
Correct.
Correct. I would be curious, as I'm sure Jesse would, what was your first impressions of a show that is 30 years old that you haven't ever seen?
Well, I just want to preface this by saying that before I started watching, I first asked my sister, who is 8 years older than me, if she had ever watched the show. Because I'm thinking, like, since she was older, like, that's something that maybe she was watching and then I wasn't. And she said no, that she did not watch the show. But however, the few times that she did watch an episode on occasion, she said she laughed out loud. So I was just like, okay. So I watched the episode, and yes, I was just like, wow, this is, this is from the 90s. I was like, and I actually didn't really remember or know what year exactly this was. So when I started watching, like, into maybe like the first 5 minutes,
Right.
Yeah.
I noticed the women's hair. So for me, that really, like, stood out. I was like, oh my God, the hair, just like the little poofiness, got to get the Aquanet out. And then I actually paused it and I went on IMDb to see, like, what year it was, and it was 1990. And I'm just like, okay, yes, this makes sense. And I was in high school, which also makes sense why I didn't watch it. Because I feel like that wasn't a show for
and we were really young.
School,
you know what I mean? So it was like,
high schoolers
I
should be
feel like
watching.
we watched it probably because we watched either what our parents were
My mom was.
watching, or we were left in front of the TV a little bit longer. We weren't old enough to, like, be in high school and be out with friends and, like, having a lot of homework, right? And so I feel like there's a disconnect to sort of the middle of us, right, which is you, that just didn't watch it. Just like there's so many actors who talk about that they missed, because we've had other actors on the show who have guest starred and they were like, oh, I didn't watch anything because I was working. There's no VCR. There was no, like, I mean, I know there was a VCR in 1990, but you know what I mean? It's like it wasn't in that framework that we have now where, like, everyone can watch everything anytime they want. And so when you said you hadn't watched it, I was like, oh, of course. No, that makes perfect sense that you hadn't seen it.
Yeah.
But I also, I mean, well, in high school I did actually watch.
Oh, I
quite
meant
a
it's
lot
an
of
adult
TV,
show. I'm
but,
sorry, I just meant that it's an
I
adult.
just didn't watch that show.
Yeah,
like
it's.
Yeah, no, yeah. No, but I mean, like, I loved, like, in terms of, like, sitcoms, like, because then I took a step back consciously after watching the show, and I thought, what did I watch? Because I was curious for myself to remember, like, well, what shows did I watch? If I wasn't watching that, and it was so popular, right?
Yeah.
And it was Golden Girls, which I still love. So I watched Golden Girls.
Yes,
I watched
Night Court's the
Cheers.
best.
I love Night Court. And
Yeah,
like
that's all
Growing
the stuff that we
Pains, Full
watched, yeah.
House, and I love Perfect Strangers. Yeah, so it was just so it's like, oh, and of course the 90210. Like,
Well,
not
and it
that that's
also,
a sitcom, but
as opposed to now,
but,
to everyone's
yeah,
point in this
90210.
conversation, is that was when airing at the same time as something else was a huge deal. Because if one thing was airing, you weren't watching. You could only VCR tape one thing. Or if you were going to go out, like, I remember rushing home to see certain things and not making plans with people because that was the one night that thing was going to air. And I didn't know if it was ever going to go into syndication so I could see it again. So yeah, if you already had a list of shows you loved, there's a very good chance you just wouldn't see the other shows that were out there.
I did not look up.
It was
what
on
day
Mondays
and
at
time
9
Murphy
o'clock.
Brown was on,
and then Designing
and
Women
what
was
was
on at
against
9:30. I don't know. Should we look that up? Yeah.
But what was against it?
We'll do the 1990.
I know we've looked it up before. I can't believe neither of us had that at the ready because
I know. I feel like we have done this.
I think we've talked about it when they had special airings.
I want the 1989, 1990 season. Let's see. 1989, 1990 TV season. That's...
Because it's like if Fresh Prince was on ABC, for example, or NBC, whatever, I think was on NBC.
I
You know what I mean?
Fresh
Like if that
Prince
was on, like, I was
at,
watching
think,
Fresh Prince. I wasn't
8:30
watching
after Alf?
Murphy Brown.
Am I right about that? And then
yeah, that sounds right. Loved Elf.
And
Well, that's
I
another
would
one. I
switch
watched
over.
I watched
Let's
Elf
see.
too.
The 89-90 United States TV season. Thank you, Wiki.
We love it. We love a wiki
Yeah,
moment.
Sunday, Monday. Okay. Monday Night Football. Are you a football fan? The ABC Monday Night
I would
Movie.
not have been watching
Maybe some
football.
Columbo.
No.
China Beach.
Oh, Columbo.
That could
Hunter.
be it.
NBC Night at the Movies.
I watched China Beach. I definitely watched that. Hunter, I watched
That's one of the
Hunter.
things
Oh my God, I totally
I've
watched Hunter.
started
I watched
introducing
China
my
Beach and
husband to
Hunter.
Murphy Brown because he never watched it. And as I rewatch it with him, it's very fun. One, I appreciate that he actually knows the references, thank goodness, for the most part, but also just how much of my love of things is referential. And this show is so referential of the time and of like the time stamps that it lives within. And so I realized that I love a hip pocket reference. And I think it's because of this show.
Yeah, it's interesting for us to do this because there's some points
That's
when we
great.
really have to explain something, and you go, okay, well, that's probably why, like, you know, it'd be hard for this show to be watched now. But it really, actually, we were surprised how much it isn't, because then there'll be references to political figures who are still around and are still, you know, influential or important to what's going on in the zeitgeist today, and then we connect it to now, and it's like, wow, like it's a little scary that it's still relevant.
Yeah, I thought it was very relevant.
Yeah,
As soon as
no,
I
we'll
started
go
watching
into it,
I don't
yeah.
know if you guys want to first
Yeah.
talk about, do the recap of the first. So right at the beginning, like the street scene with the construction workers, and you see these like, you know, random women walking by, and they're like, "Oh, hey, baby, wah, 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 hubba, hubba, hubba," whatever, you know, and you don't even hear what they're saying. Like there's, what was it? My Girl's playing, which I thought was, you know, of course, a brilliant choice. Talking about My Girl, and these women are, you know, walking by, and the construction workers, you know, are the stereotypical, right? The stereotypical story. And I was thinking like, oh, geez, this is just clearly way before Me Too, you know? And I'm just sitting there going like, and then Murphy Brown shows up, and she just goes off on the construction workers.
But
and
you
still
know.
Yeah,
what
you
she's
know.
saying, but you can see like she's just like, what are you doing? You know, like telling him off, and like actually chases him down the street, which I thought was like hysterical. And I was just like,
Well, and
That's
Lauren,
right.
you have a special
Like, that's
tidbit about who one of
okay.
those women was.
Yes,
beautiful,
so you
correct?
would know this. But so the first woman is this beautiful blonde woman in a workout outfit, and you know they won't let her pass, and she just really hates it, as we all do. And then the second woman, who is in a beautiful black business suit and has a briefcase, that's Diane English, who created Murphy Brown in her first cameo on the series.
With those great
Yeah.
legs.
Oh, yeah. Well, here's the thing. So Diane in, I guess, 91, 92, like right before the Dan Quayle thing, she did a Hanes print ad. Obviously, most people wouldn't know that this was Diane.
That's
As
very cool,
She's
yeah.
going out of frame, as she's leaving the frame, I should say, Candace, as Murphy, kind of comes in. And I thought that was such a great sort of little sort of juxtaposition that they did to sort of have them replace each other at the same time. But I also think this scene is kind of wish fulfillment, don't you think? Like, we all want to run after them.
Oh, yeah.
oh yeah, or just to like, yeah, like that definitely never happened. I mean, maybe, you know, the younger women now, it's the, you know, post Me Too movement and post a lot of movements, and the Gen Zs, I feel like definitely have a lot more, I feel, self-awareness and more confidence.
Same, yeah.
Definitely than I had when I was that age, for sure. And but yeah, that's a really great point. I'm really glad you said that, wish fulfillment, being in those kind of situations, and you just want to like stab someone in the head, you know, or just tell them off.
I see a lot of
or,
Gen Z,
you know, like
and
don't,
even
you can't
younger
do that.
millennial
Don't do
on
that.
TikTok giving advice for like ways to clap back in those scenarios. And I'm like, as not of your time, I don't have that readiness or that conditioning to feel like I am safe enough to. And I think something about this particular opening and the wish fulfillment element is that the nostalgia of that backlot stage.
Oh, yeah.
The backlot street, like, it's not dangerous. It does not actually feel like we're in the city where that kind of thing would happen. Like, if I think about walking down under some scaffolding on, you know, 8th Avenue and that happens, there's no way I'm going to feel safe enough to chase some dude down the street or talk back to them. But in this lovely kind of sitcom backlot street, I'm like,
Right,
yes, chase
yeah.
him, get him, Murph, you can do it. Like, it feels so much, it feels like the ideal.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't like one dude. It wasn't one dude and one woman. It was like exactly. It was more like seemed like a party scene in some sense, you know. But and when I was in my 20s, like I'll never forget this because I just thought it was like so random and so hysterical. I'm walking down the street and I was by myself on the street and it was just one guy sitting on a stoop. Again, like, and the rest of the street is empty. But I was wearing this yellow dress. I'm walking by and I'm laughing because it's pretty funny. I'm walking by and I hear him say, boy, would I love to peel that banana. And I was like, I turn around, I'm like, what? Like, what? You know, like, it's just so weird. Like, I had you just have these like random things that guys say. But again, I didn't say anything. I just kept walking because it's just like, first of all, what do you even say to that? Because again, it's like, I've never been at the ready in those kind of situations, and then it's like 2 hours later, it comes
Plus,
to
as
me
a
like,
woman, you know, particularly in New York City
funny,
or any big city, it's like you don't know what that person's gonna do. When you're in that moment, I think there's that sort of that fear of like, well, I'm alone, I'm a woman, like I don't know how this person's gonna react to me. You know, I just have to ignore it and keep going.
Yeah, you just kind of walk a little bit faster. And
even the
like,
random jerk who tells you to smile, you don't know if you talk back to that what could happen. I saw someone break this. I hate it so, and the number of cis male friends who I've talked to about this who genuinely thought that was an exaggeration.
Yeah, right.
Until I'm like, no. Every one of us has had that. Like it is. You have to realize it's not an exaggeration. Every day there's a new one, and someone was breaking it down as a matter because someone was trying to pull the like not all men are jerks like that, and a young woman made the point of we're taught in, for example, gun safety or weapon safety, always assume that the weapon is loaded. Like always handle it as if it is until you know otherwise, kind of thing. And she was like, that's how we have to treat all men. No matter if you think you're joking and you're saying something like that to us, we have to assume you're loaded. We have to operate from the perspective of we have to assume that possibly the worst could happen. And thus, we're not making any room for you when you think you're giving a harmless joke because we don't know.
So this episode is written by friends of the podcast, Gary Donzig and Steve Peterman. And Steve was nice enough to send us some thoughts, which we will pepper throughout the episode. Obviously, and we'll talk about this more probably on our Patreon, the title, The Bitch Is Back, is based off the song of Elton John, The Bitch Is Back, which Elton John considers his theme song. It's aired May 7th, 1990. So I'm just going to really quickly talk about a short little history of My Girl, which is considered one of the quintessential Motown songs, as well as sort of the quintessential soul recording of the 1960s. It was written by Miracle's bandmates Smokey Robinson and Ronnie White. It is known for the beautiful guitar opening, which was by Motown session player Robert White, although the Funk Brothers are involved in the song, which makes sense. But what's interesting is that I think a lot of people think that Smokey Robinson wrote it for himself and then the Temptations just recorded it. But he wrote it specifically for David Ruffin's voice, who had just taken over as one of the lead vocalists at the Temptations. And before that, the Temps had sort of had like maybe one, top 10 hit or number one hit, I should say. And then once David Ruffin came on, who became sort of the Temps' signature sound, they had 23 top number one hits. So he joined the Temptations, in January of 1964, and this song was released in December of 1964, and it's considered by Billboard magazine as one of the 10th biggest hits of 1965. David Ruffin had been living with Berry Gordy, who started Motown. His father did construction, and so he was a contractor, and he was doing construction for him, and so he lived with him. And then later on, before David Ruffin ended up working for Motown and being through the Temptations, he literally helped build the building, figuratively and literally, because he was working for Berry Gordy's father. He was one of the people who helped build Hitsville, USA, which is still obviously in Detroit. Mm-hmm. But it goes back and forth whether he wrote the song about his wife, Claudette. Smokey Robinson's wife, Claudette, was also in the Miracles. And it was meant to be sort of a reaction to My Guy by Mary Wells. I don't remember the first time I heard this song because I've always known this song. Mm-hmm. Do you remember the first time you heard My Girl, Matilda?
Oh, geez, no. I mean, I grew up, listening to the old, like my mom would have the oldie stations on.
So what's interesting about this episode is,
Motown was always playing in the house.
You're not going to be able to experience the joy of Charles Kimbrough as Jim. Because he's not in this episode, because apparently he got sick that week. and they had to write him out.
And yet, did they give Jim such a lovely moment anyway? Yes, because we love Jim.
So Steve told us that they had to quickly write him out because he was sick, and that Diane came up with this whole idea that he was out sailing with Walter Cronkite.
Poor Jim.
And then, of course, later on, it was a way to bring Phil into the scene. By having him read the letter, which, obviously we'll get to. And so we start the episode after the opening where Frank is... So I found this really funny is that it feels like Frank is walking around the bullpen with all this stuff in his arms like he's in an Aaron Sorkin television series.
It felt very Sorkin.
It's just very much like a walk and talk. Pretty much the gist of this is that Miles is following Frank because he didn't read the memo. And Frank says that he should cut it up into little pieces and distribute it throughout the office because he's an investigative reporter and then he can actually, do his job and look for it, which is obviously him just mocking Miles. We find out later that, of course, the joke is that no one has actually read this memo. He asks Fran, one of the extras, to look for it.
I love the fact that
So good.
she grabbed the memo from the garbage. Like, it was just like that great comic moment. Like, you tell him what it's about.
It
And
also
she's,
just shows how no one
straight
really
into the
still
trash. And he's
respects
like,
him.
oh, come on.
Quirky tries. Our sweet little do-gooder.
We know that Miles is neurotic. We know that, he is someone who probably has a lot of stress, but he really is being professional Miles in this. And then he's also just showing, like, literally I wrote he's having a conniption fit. Just show how sort of, stressed he is to set up the rest of the episode. That's something I actually really do like about this episode. I don't think it has as many jokes per kappa as a lot of other ones, but like the way that it's structurally set up, I think it really sort of sets up, everything that happens so that it makes sense and it doesn't just feel like it's happening just because that's what the plot is, which I think can happen in a lot of sitcoms. That Jim is out on a boat with Walter Cronkite and that the reason that Frank has never been out is because Walter Cronkite doesn't like Frank.
Which tracks.
Frank becomes like all of our worst nightmares, when we're all like, oh, I don't know if that person likes me. And he has all those thoughts, but they're all real.
His neuroses are consistently validated in this show. And it's just, it feels like the opposite of wish fulfillment to watch. It's like, oh gosh, it's true. Everyone dislikes me. I am uncomfortable. And I was correct.
I meant to ask Matilda, have you seen any of these other actors in any other shows or are they all new to you?
The main people know what I did. I actually jotted down that you're talking about Frank. I actually thought that he was like, he felt like the comedy version.
Very good. Yes.
Doug Stamper from House of Cards.
Yes.
Michael Kelly, who, obviously that's very dramatic, and I love Michael Kelly. He's amazing. But watching Murphy Brown for the first time, and I was just like, that's really bizarre. Like, he kind of has the same
I totally see
vibe
that.
about
That's so
him
interesting.
in terms of the
He's did a lot
character,
of
but
drama
the
before
comedy
this,
version.
kind of like a lot of the Mary Tyler Moore people, like Ted Knight and Mr. Grant. I think that's interesting. Yeah. Everyone in the office apparently took some sort of stress test,
I love
and
Ted
people
Knight.
did not do very well. As in perfect timing, Murphy comes out of her office with a pregnant secretary. I think we can guess is in labor. And Murphy would like her to type up her notes because first babies are always late.
Bless.
Yeah, I thought that was absolutely hysterical. Like, you still have time?
Yes.
Just in general, it
Yes.
seems like everyone's scared of Murphy Brown. Like, she's like this, hardcore boss. And it was great to see. And I just thought it was also interesting. I think it was like the 90s take on, like, somehow she had to come off as like being so hardcore and being so strong. And I think that's just, unfortunately, a commentary on like if, a woman is to be heard or listened to as a boss, like it's like she has to, unfortunately, come off like be harder or stronger than a male boss would be. Well, there is that running joke like constantly where it's like they do make fun of her for being so headstrong. So I actually honestly don't know like how I feel about that. I mean, again, it was like the 90s, but I think it was the show did, was a history maker, and it did set like the precedence of like, women should be treated equally and can be a boss and everything. But I think, obviously we're not at the end of the episode yet, but I just, I thought that was like the one or the first moment in the entire episode where you see Murphy Brown, she's treating a colleague equally and vice versa when she's having that conversation at the end of the episode. And that struck me because of the whole episode, she's just, not easy to get along with. and everyone was like making jokes about that, but at the end, it's finally like, it's like on equal footing. Like her and her colleague are equal, and they're having like a real conversation. I felt like there was respect there on both ends. So yeah, I guess in general, I just thought that was quite interesting, but I guess that must be like the running joke throughout the whole series.
Yeah, it was originally
like
sold
tough
as
broad.
the concept of her being Mike Wallace in a dress, and that the whole commentary about the kind of that pitfall of third wave feminism, of that you have to be masculine and with masculine stereotypical masculine traits to succeed as a woman. And then you have one of my favorite things that I talk about a lot on the show is the dichotomy of her and Corky, and how Corky is a woman who is not getting rid of stereotypical feminine traits, but is working at the same type of job, not necessarily at Murphy's level, because Murphy is this like up an echelon character, but what happens about the two of them in opposition of a hyper feminine versus a woman who seems to have taken on a lot of what are considered masculine traits. But then also to watch one of our favorite relationships and dynamics in this is Murphy versus Miles, and having this like young man as her boss, and the way like watching this woman who's fought so hard to get to this position of power and respect in a man's game, then have her boss be this 20-something little mensch who's just running around. And their relationship is so interesting and so dynamic, and they have so many great moments throughout the series as Murphy accepts him, or challenges him, or the beautiful moments when he actually challenges Murphy, which is something I love in this episode, when he does put his foot down.
Yeah, it sort of feels like, and obviously you don't have that experience that we have, is that a lot of the two seasons have kind of been leading up to this, that there's consequences to acting the way that Murphy acts, which is that she hurt her back and that she needs to take a break, which I think a lot of women, whether they act like Murphy or not, were sort of taught that like we need to have all of these balls in the air. But I love what you brought up about the fact that, seeing it in a perspective of you're not sure what you think of her, because I think you're right. But because we had Murphy in a way that could go, oh, women can behave badly, that we can have, other heroines today, like even Midge Maisel, or, any of the really great female characters that we have that have edges, but also vulnerability. And the thing is, it is a sitcom, right? So like her vulnerability tends to come like at the end of the episodes. Yeah. And this isn't one that necessarily has, as much of it. The learning moment. Exactly. Yeah. Where it's like,
that's the learning moment.
She's sort of kind of one of the rungs of female characters that we needed to have to get to where we are now.
Yeah, she just seemed very harsh, but again, it was a sitcom. So, and they
don't let her, they don't let it pass. Which is good. Like, it's not like,
throughout.
I don't want to say that she, she learns what she does because we have our learning moment, but a lot of times she doesn't succeed because of the way that she is bulldozing through life, even though that's how she kind of got where she was in a man's world. Right.
Yeah.
And you kind of, that's like I said, that you kind of had to do that.
Yeah,
though.
you see her, that's what she had to do. And then but you also have someone like Corky, and she ends up having pretty much the same life as Murphy, being just as successful and being able to have it on her own terms.
Oh, I also just appreciate, because sometimes and this show is good about not doing this too often, but growing up as someone who saw female role models as people who had to be like, go up against the dudes, and getting sick of watching kind of the men put them in their place, I really enjoy episodes like this when it's like the female nurses are done with her jumping ahead, and the female nurses are like, no, you're done.
Yes.
You're me. We don't like you. I love watching other people of her gender kind of call her on that and be like, you're impossible. And it's not because you're like some gender betrayer.
Right. And that's a great point, because then it isn't about male versus female. It's about being either a nice or not nice human being at the end of the day, so but it's what's interesting. So I had lunch with a friend of mine a couple of weeks ago, and she randomly I can't remember what we were talking about, but she made a comment which I was like, you are so right. She goes, the phrase working woman, you never would say oh, he's a working man. You never hear that. So why does it have to be, oh, she's a working mom. She's a working
Murphy
woman.
realizes that everyone's staring
Like,
at
and
her
people
because
still
she's being
say that.
ridiculous, as we've discussed. And she goes, what? Miles says that tomorrow at 9 a.m., they are going to do a stress reduction class, and everyone, even Murphy, has to be there. And of course, the dreaded Murphy needs to see Miles in her office. And when in the office, Miles refuses to close the door and must see her hands at all times. Gives you an idea, Matilda. You never know what she might do. We hear stories.
I love
we
that.
don't
I
know,
love
but some of it's involved wild animals. We've been
She'll
told.
throw a soft object. Like, she'll do it.
So is that why
Oh,
he said
no.
that? Because I took it as a sexual reference, kind of like.
That's so interesting. I could totally see it that way.
I thought it was like a
from
Harvey
a
Weinstein
perspective. No, it's
moment
because
where like,
she's been known to hurt people
Yeah.
when she's not happy.
Yeah.
This is the first episode I watched. I thought it was just like, oh, that's really cool that here's this dude who is like saying to
Well, it's interesting
his,
you say that.
woman
He's
boss,
her boss.
like, I need to see your
Yeah.
hands the whole time we're in.
Right? Of course you wouldn't. Of course you wouldn't. No, of course you
Well, see, I
wouldn't.
didn't-
Because the
I know, I
dynamic
didn't know
is
that
not
until you
that
said
at
this
all. No, it
earlier.
makes total sense. That's why it's interesting to like get that perspective, right, from someone who doesn't know the show. So we eventually learn that Murphy was the second worst score, and that she scored a 284, where a 250 is a triple bypass. And she asks who the worst was, and by Miles's face, we know that it was him.
No surprise there. He's Murphy's
No surprise
boss.
at all. Yes, he is. And so he kind of, sulks out of the office, and a child voice just goes, no, just be there. So Murphy is going to have a coronary if she doesn't go to this stress relief class. And part of me kind of feels that right now.
And then we find ourselves on class day. And I want to say the opening shot of everyone in their various athletic garb gave me two things. One, it gave me like warming up for a dance class at Broadway Dance or Steps. Like everyone, for some reason, everyone was just like warming up for whatever they thought they were going to do. But also, I was laughing so hard at the outfits because I realized that fashion has circled back. And that is now
Yes.
a lot of the current athleisure fashion is we're back to this. And so I was like, wow, some of these outfits don't look nearly as out of time as I'm used to the show looking, because I see so many people in these outfits now.
I saw someone yesterday.
Yeah. Oh, the tracksuits.
Yeah, the tracksuits
Speaking
are
of the
just like you
tracksuits.
can get like.
Corky's in a blue tracksuit. I love it's that very like 80s, 90s kind of pastel fluorescence. So it's the blue with the green stripes and the gray down the sides. Very cute. Again, they're warming up. And Miles walks in the exact same tracksuit as Corky. And I will say, having not remembered this episode very well, I genuinely thought I thought the joke was going to be that Miles had sent outfits to everyone and she was the only one who wore the outfit. And so I loved the payoff that yet again, Miles ended up in like a woman's outfit that he thought looked cool. But it's good morning, everyone. He's delighted to see them, and face to face with Corky, and poor Miles's face. Miles is always trying to be taken seriously. Poor Miles. And Frank just loves his outfit. And sweet Corky is just like, I hate it when this happens. How much did you pay for yours? Poor. Oh.
Yes.
And everyone's hair looks absolutely fabulous. Miles's hair is like all nicely feathered and a pseudo mullet.
It's so good.
Everyone's got their hair
I really
done
was
with
trying
the
to figure out
hairspray.
when everyone
It's fantastic.
found the time to get ready for this, because Murphy does appear in a little bit in her full office garb. And so I just wanted to know who brought their full workout gear to work that day, did their hair and makeup for this work. It was very interesting to me that it was 9 a.m., correct?
Yeah,
On a work
he
day.
let
It wasn't
them
a
know.
weekend.
I mean, if it's
Yeah.
a stress thing, maybe it was in the memo that everyone fished out of the
that no
garbage.
one read.
I mean, I was always the one that read everything and did everything. I remember the first day of my first acting class in college was like dress comfortably, and so like I wore sweatpants and like a big giant T-shirt. Nope, everyone was dressed really nice, and I look like a schlub because I was like, but I thought no one dressed comfortably, just me.
Yeah, I've always been a very good teacher's pet who follows all the rules and then realized that everyone else relaxes them. So Miles does not bite and tries to just ignore the fact that he looks like Corky today. He wonders where Murphy is. Frank says, "Oh, she's dead. Didn't anybody tell you?" Miles points out that a simple "I don't know" would do, Frank. And he introduces I love this, Mr. Guru Prem. Not Guru Prem, Mr. Guru Prem. And I'm just going to do a slight aside because this is Gere Watanabe, also known as Gary Watanabe, who goes by Getty. Most people I think is going to know as Long Duk Dong from 16 Candles, which he had done right before this. That had come out right before this episode. So he's kind of riding the high of that particular role. Bless his sweetheart in this role. He's trying so hard. What's interesting, and something I alluded to earlier, was that Gere was a Japanese family in Oregon. He grew up an American boy, no accent, just happens to be Japanese. And I found this interview on Vulture where he was talking, it was for the 30th anniversary of 16 Candles. And he was talking about the audition. And he was living in New York. He'd been in the original cast of Pacific Overtures and worked with Public Theater and Joe Papp, and his agent sent him the script. It said the character was a foreign exchange student from Asia, and that was about it. So to set himself apart, he went to one of his friends who had a very thick Korean accent and learned his friend's thick Korean accent and went in for the audition with that accent. And I was like, well done, dude. And he said
that's fantastic.
He got there, the casting director, Jackie Birch, believed it so much that she started talking to him like he was from another country, and he had to break down and admit that he was lying. And he was so afraid that they were going to then just ignore him and fire him on the spot after they found out. And they were like, oh, no, that's great. They said, just don't tell John. And so they go to set. He's doing this in this accent. John does not know that he's directing someone who has a perfectly good American accent. And he finally pulled him aside to be like, hey, dude, I have to tell you something. And the entire crew apparently was shocked that he didn't have this accent. And he understood the assignment. He showed up and did it.
Mm-hmm. I think that's fantastic. I love that story. I was always too afraid. Like going back to what we were talking about earlier, I was just always too afraid to just walk in, I guess in method, kind of like with the accent already, for a number of reasons. But I think I love that story. I think that's a fantastic story.
Yeah. Well,
that he was able to do that. I've actually had after season 1 of Maisel, because a lot of times, most of the crew would only hear me or hear and see me as Zelda, because then like the actors would then, like when they were like changing out the lights or the cameras or turnaround and stuff, like the actors would be in our own like little green room, and then on set, I would just be in accent. And I had a handful of crew members come up to me, like, at the wrap party, like, shocked. So I was like, oh, hey, what's up? And they're just like, oh, my God. They're like, oh, my God, you have an American accent?
Yeah. I'm an actor. I'm good at my job.
Like, where you been? But I was like... But I love that.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, that's what I thought. I'm just like, oh, well, let me pat myself on the back. If they actually, like legit thought that I was like,
well, and it's also interesting
you know
for
what I mean? Like
someone
like that's
like
awesome.
Watanabe, who, he's been asked obviously for 30 years now about the backlash to that character as far as Asian representation, and he talks a lot about the fact that he went in feeling very supported and not like he was being made a punchline. That the point of the movie was about stereotypes, and so he understood that he was going in to create one and do that, but also the fact that one of the ways for him to stand out as an Asian actor was to sound more Asian as far as casting was concerned at the time, because there were so few roles. And so he talks in other interviews about like the pressure being an Asian performer, a young Asian performer, that how do you ride that line between being like, well, I'm an American and I live here and we don't all sound like that, and trying to book the few roles that were available for him at the time and them expecting a certain thing.
Right. And and a lot of times though, it's like, that's how you do stand out though. I mean, because it's like you have like a million people going out for like the same roles. And I think there are definitely a handful of actors out there who had that talent. They had the talent of being able to speak another language or to be able to do an accent, but still they were, American. But a handful of them started out in these type of like foreign roles to get their foot in the door. I was watching Raiders of the Lost Ark last night.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Alfred Molina at the beginning of the movie is there with, his, with an accent. And it's just like, wow, okay, well, that's one of his first roles, if not his first role. I couldn't say I didn't look it up, but I'm just like, okay, great, that's how he started.
Yeah, and it's
and then
and
he
it's
moved on
interesting
from
that-
there.
Oh,
kind of
go ahead.
thing.
No, I believe that is his first movie role, actually, because he had been doing theater in England. And I've heard him talk about that and just how, like, that's what got him the role because, particularly in England, he was one of the few people who were out there auditioning who unfortunately looked like him. There's the idea of, what is English? And I think that's something that a lot of actors I know even today have, been dealing with. But sorry, Jesse, you were saying.
Oh, I was just going to say, and then we have, the door was opened for a young actor like Mr. Watanabe, and he goes on to, then have a long running character on ER and to do all these other, like eventually he was able to be more than that particular role. But it makes sense that for a lot of people, sometimes you have to figure out you're in, and sometimes the thing that got you in the door can also hinder you. There's a great actor, he's a stage and screen actor in, I'm obsessed with Our Flag Means Death on HBO, which I know Lauren has seen me posting constantly about on social media. But one of the actors is someone who has had cleft palate surgery and had speech therapy because of that. And I was reading an interview with him about his career and them asking about that particular impediment being in the way of his performance. And he's like, yeah, it's definitely gotten in the way of me getting certain roles because I sound and look a little different than other people. But it's also been the thing that got me roles. So at the end of the day, it does seem to kind of even out.
Yeah.
Especially now, I do think, like I said, there's a lot more opportunity for a lot of people with different backgrounds in general, how they look, how they sound, for different roles on TV shows and films, and which I think is
saw the story that reminded
absolutely
me
fantastic.
while watching this episode and I hope I say his name correctly, but Ki Kwan, who played Short Round in speaking of Indiana Jones, the little kid from Goonies.
I almost brought him up because I just saw the movie.
Oh, yeah.
I'm obsessed with the movie.
Yeah, and I assumed it
didn't
was
act
his
for like-
choice because
he didn't act for
kid
like 30
actor,
years.
right? You just age out and you realize it's not really what you want to do because it just was something that your parents brought you to and then you did for fun, right? And he was on Jimmy Kimmel and he said no, he couldn't get roles, so he went behind the scenes and then he saw Crazy Rich Asians. And he started crying. He saw it 3 times and he realized he wasn't just crying because of the representation. He was crying because he was jealous of them. And so he saw that as sort of an opening to go back. And I was so happy for him. And I thought that's a wonderful story, but it's also a sad story that he felt that he had to go away because there weren't roles. But now there are roles. And so I do hope that things are changing. And it feels like it is.
Well, and also for his particular story, I love that interview. It made me cry. I watched it 3 times. But it was fascinating because he went behind the scenes and he also became a really accomplished martial artist in that time.
Yeah.
And that all leads to him being the absolute perfect person for this movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once. Like, he was made for this role. And it was, I think I heard his first audition back into I'm going to try this again. And he got this. And it is, it's unbelievable. And it's that thing of things happened a certain way, but also he's perfect for this role because you get to see everything he's done in the meantime and the person he's become in the meantime blend into this. His story is really beautiful. So is that movie. Anywho.
I've not seen that movie yet, but that's another Maisel
Yeah.
connection. Stephanie,
I'm very
Sue
happy for her too.
is also in
Well,
that. She's
speaking of
fantastic.
gentle soul standing there in his, what we would assume a guru outfit would look like. It's definitely very of a, like, we have created a stereotype and we're going all into the stereotype of the guru. He is sure everyone will find the next few minutes enlightening and enjoyable. And all he asks is that they stay open because good thoughts cannot blossom in the arid soil of a closed mind. And as we all knew was about to happen, in comes Murphy Brown.
I do love the white popped collar.
Oh,
though.
yeah.
It's very sort of Diane Keaton.
I love her outfits.
in a way. Like yes, we're kind of obsessed with her
Yeah.
clothes. Well, clothes in general.
And of course, she bursts in like a hurricane from the back of the group, all the way front and center. I wrote, as we all knew she would. And her outfit is if she's just going to do this, go back to the office. She's not here to do this thing. And she says, all right, I'm ready. Let's do this. Let's reduce our stress and get the hell out of here. And then she looks to the left of her.
Yeah, I wrote down
I feel
that
like we all
I
can
love
relate.
her.
Murphy Brown is a mood.
I don't have time for
as
this
the
attitude.
internet would say.
Well, I just love that she looks over, clocks Miles and Corky's outfit and says, oh, geez, no one told me we were going to have teams. It's so savage. Well, and I love that they're
Yes.
asking why she's dressed like that. And she says, and
that's
the
funny.
way she entered, the way she spoke, everything is summed up in the line that she's just going to stand and watch and do it at home tonight. She promises she will. And eye rolls her way back to the guru.
I appreciate how when she does the movements, like she's kind of just doing it sort of half-assed.
Oh, no,
like,
don't. We're going to get to that,
Yeah.
this arm work.
Okay.
So at that moment, the guru asks for attention. He turns on an atmospheric soundscape. It's really sending me back to a lot of the like Enya era soundscape CD collections you could get in any spa or hair salon. And he's going to teach them some exercises that can lower their blood pressure and raise their energy levels. And I'm not going to lie, I, as myself, was like, ooh, what are they? It sounds nice. And he says, the first one is the elephant waves his trunk and calls to the herd, which turns into a slight lunge and a swooping arm motion and lots of connected breathing. And everyone's trying. No one is trying more than Miles in this moment. Miles is really trying to commit to relaxation, which of course is completely undo him. And Frank starts calling, oh, herd, herd. It was so good. Also,
He's very old. He's very little brother.
I actually
in
did
this.
laugh out
Yes,
loud for that
Frank.
moment. I love the physical comedy. That's what I was thinking. Like that.
and
Just
I,
that
And
physical
Grandshot
comedy
is
of,
really
the
great at
90s
it. And
sitcoms.
it's not necessarily a show that I think of as like a physical comedy show. So when they do it, it's so specific. But what he's doing is, I mean, eventually we'll get to the scene in the hospital particularly too. But yeah, it's hilarious. And something, I don't know if Jesse, if you were going to talk about this, but the writers were telling us, Steve Peterman and Gary Donzig, but Steve Peterman sent us the messages I mentioned, was that at the time, Steve was doing a lot of yoga in 1990 and Gary was doing Tai Chi. And so they pitched this idea because obviously that was something that was in their life. And I think you can tell that this is funny, but it does come from a place of truth, which I think is important.
I think that's why I kept being like, I don't know, I could see that working. Like I was actually, as a person watching, being like,
Yeah.
I could see that breath work actually calming me. I also just want to call out the awesome featured extras that are on either side of Frank when he does the oh herd, because they are genuinely laughing at him doing it, but it feels very much like they are coworkers enjoying their coworker, especially the woman in the orange next to him that just is clearly just amused to no end by Frank's antics. And I just love any time I get to see one of them having a good time. Murphy turns to Miles, and the only way I can describe it is she's flapping only from her elbow in the general directions of where the other arms are going. But it's like she's kind of warm, or maybe there's a bug in the way, but she's doing it. She's kind of swaying a little bit with it, but she's doing Murphy's version. And so while it's so good. It's just full of her disdain at everything she has to do.
I thought
right
that
now.
was pretty funny.
And while she's flapping from the elbow, she's asking if he's read the stuff she left on his desk last night, because Pine River's been buying up land all over the facility and she thinks they're hiding something. Miles is trying to concentrate, and the guru just appears behind her saying, that's it, feel the power of your trunk.
I actually did when I was watching that. I was thinking. I wondered, and Lauren, you just said what the writer said. I was wondering if that was the time period, the early 90s, when this type of class became popular. And I did not look it up, but that did cross my mind. I'm just like, I wonder if this was like the trend of let's go do yoga, versus, in the 80s was
And Steve said he was doing it from a book, so it must have been very new.
with the
That's
leg
a good
warmers.
point. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, I am curious about the timing of all of that now, actually, because specifically because of the way that the exercises are described, it does seem like it's referencing a more well-known like knowing about the different forms of Tai Chi in particular and the way that that's been brought into so many comedy spaces, it feels like it's a reference to something that the general public would be laughing at.
Right, like they were kind of making fun of that class. Like everyone must have been taking that class after work or something. Not necessarily like a stress test class for the work, you know what I mean? But like, you know, going to that yoga class or that Tai Chi class, and I kind of got that feeling like the show was making fun of those type of classes, and I'm thinking, I
so
wonder if
apparently
that's because it's like it was a new trend.
The small little thing says that sort of it says hippie and new age movement popularizes yoga. That's the title here for the history of yoga. That by the 1980s and 90s, the introduction of the VHS tapes and DVDs and the rise of the fitness industry made yoga part of people's everyday routine, and that's something I hadn't thought of either. That makes a lot of sense. It was more accessible to everybody because you could just pop in a VHS tape and you know, do your workout. This is I'll put this link in our show notes, but it's the long history of yoga in the United States.
That is an appropriated history. So
yes, I'm sure
after the guru makes his way back through the rest of the class, Murphy asks where they got this guy. Did they not notice that smile? They think he's all peace and love. Then one day the police find his mother in a hefty bag in the freezer. And then the guru announces we're moving on to a new pose. It's the penguin grooms his feathers, which what I love is it's breath, shoulders, and then a really particular rhythmic plie with their little feet turned out. And I love the moment when you see the entire group have to do it at once. It's such lovely like physical comedy in that moment.
Yeah, exactly.
And Murphy says this is ridiculous. She just needs to talk to Miles for a minute.
Great,
If she flies to Pine River this afternoon, maybe she can get close enough to get some soil samples. And then at that moment, they're going to gently go into the monkey goes to sleep and dreams of the stars, which sounds lovely.
Yeah, his
Everyone
voice is
does
very
a very exaggerated.
calming.
It's so nice.
It's very nice.
I would enjoy his class, I think. And everyone goes into a side crouch where they hold their heads. And she says, yeah, right, she can see herself doing this every day. Miles, she wants to go to Pine River. She needs the authorization. She smacks him in the back. She needs him to make a decision. He can't hear her because the blood's rushing to his head. So she bends forward to repeat it in his face, and we immediately know there's a problem. And I wrote, as everyone reaches as a monkey for a coconut, Murphy is stuck. And we find out, of course, she's having a muscle spasm. And she is stuck in that beautiful... This feels like a very 80s, 90s joke about the person who bends forward and gets stuck because of a back thing.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a sitcom trope, I think. Yeah, but she sells it.
It sends me to a very specific time. I feel like I've seen this particular moment happen in various ways. I feel like it mostly happens with older men, though. So I appreciate seeing a healthy woman get stuck in this position because of a back spasm.
I don't know if we can call Murphy healthy. She doesn't exercise. Well, she used to smoke like a chimney. She used to be an alcoholic. And she also eats a lot of donuts.
But she is very physically, clearly not an 80-year-old man who has a walker.
Okay, fair point.
So the guru tells her to try and relax, breathe air into those muscles. By the way, you have signed a release form, haven't you? Join us for part 2.
Good morning, everyone. I'm sure you'll find the next few minutes enlightening and enjoyable. All I ask is that you remain open. Good thoughts cannot blossom in the arid soil of a closed mind.
All right, I'm ready. Let's do this. Let's reduce our stress and get the hell out of here. Gee, nobody told me we were having teams.
Why aren't you dressed?
I'm just gonna stand and watch and then do it at home tonight. I really will, I promise.